I benefited personally from mentorship as a young person who made bad decisions, went to prison when I was 17, bumped my head a number of times, and was able to get a second chance at life through mentorship, and decided to dedicate my second chance at life to helping young people reach their full potential, not make the decisions I made, and be a defender of potential. Mentoring is important to me because it helps young people make it out of poverty. And in my opinion, poverty is the biggest challenge we face in our country.
Welcome to the UMGC podcast, Unstoppable Stories, with your host, Lauren Cardillo.
Today, I'm joined by Kwame Johnson, who is now the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters, Metro Atlantic area, an author, a dad, and of course, a UMGC grad. Welcome, Kwame. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Good morning.
My first question is, I remember you saying, I think it was at Homecoming, that as a CEO, you are a defender of potential. And for those people who have no idea what that means, what does that mean to you personally?
Well, what it means to me is that everyone, in particular kids, have potential. And my thought is that as adults, it's our responsibility to defend their potential. Everybody, yourself, anyone that's watching this now, to get to where we've gotten to, we've had someone along the way defend our potential. In many ways, that's a mentor. And that is what I've been doing for most of my career, is mentorship in different shapes of forms, but primarily with young people, helping them get to the next level by defending their potential. So anyone who's mentoring someone, anyone who's leaning into young people, I consider you all a defender of potential.
Why is that so important to you? Why is that something that strikes you so personally?
Because I benefited personally from mentorship as a young person who made bad decisions, went to prison when I was 17, bumped my head a number of times, and was able to get a second chance at life through mentorship, and decided to dedicate my second chance at life to helping young people reach their full potential, not make the decisions I made, and be a defender of potential. Mentoring is important to me because it helps young people make it out of poverty. And in my opinion, poverty is the biggest challenge we face in our country. It affects everyone across different economic backgrounds, political backgrounds, race. Poverty is something that affects everyone. And so many bad things come out of it, from crime and violence and drugs. So, I know through mentorship that in our program in particular, 98% of our kids graduate high school. And education is the fastest way out of poverty. 95% avoid the criminal justice system. So mentorship is a solution to poverty, which I think is one of the most wicked challenges we face in our country.
For you, as you just said, you made a wrong turn. You grew up in a supportive family to parents who are educators, correct?
Yes, both my parents, mom and dad.
So what was the sort of what was lacking, or what distracted you to end up in prison? And then you're thinking, what am I going to do with my life? How'd that happen?
Yeah, whenever I talk to parents in particular, I start off by telling them it's not your fault, right? Too often parents take on that responsibility, in particular for teenage and young adult children. When we leave our homes, it's up to us, the decisions we make and the friendships we make and the type of people we hang around and things we do. You can come from the best home or the worst home. But when you, as a young person, leave out of that home, it's up to you to make the decisions you made. So that is what happened with me, and just made some bad decisions, being around the wrong people, nothing to do with my upbringing. But what did help me is having a strong foundation to bounce back from. A lot of young people who've been through what I have been through don't have a strong support system, don't have a family structure to come home to, don't have defenders of potential rooting for them to help them make a comeback.
I remember when you were at Homecoming here, you talked about that Mark Twain quote, where it's the two important dates, the day you were born and the day you figure out why you're here.
Yes.
And that's something you figured out in prison, right?
Yes, I figured it out in solitary confinement, probably the worst places anyone could be, 23 hours a day in a hole. But I met some young men who their stories have, been with me since then. And them being through the situations they've been through and not having parents in their lives, not having supportive systems, made me think, okay, I got to figure out a way to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody else. And that's where I found my passion. I didn't realize it at the time. I was a kid and I was just trying to get through it. But in later in life, I figured it out. And it's interesting how God puts you through different situations to help you figure out what you're actually supposed to be doing.
How long did you end up in prison for?
A whole year, my senior year of high school. So I did my schoolwork in the mail, became the first kid ever in the United States of America to take the SATs behind bars. It's kind of a long story, but it's documented in my book called The Hope Inside. And I picked that title. Actually, I borrowed it from Oprah Winfrey. She has a quote where she talks about mentors bring hope that's inside of us, outside of us. So I went with the title, The Hope Inside, subtitle, Harnessing the Power of Mentorship in Life and Career. But that's where it all started. And it's really about, for me, helping young people reach their full potential and having hope.
Well, it's sort of the same thing. Your potential, your hope, it's already there. You just have to figure out how to get it out. I did read the story you wrote about how you got the SAT in prison. And if you can do a short version of that, because I thought that was great persistence to try to make that happen. Like, what hoops did you have to jump through?
Yeah, and I didn't realize all of it at the time. I was really just trying to get a scholarship to Hampton University because I was a track runner before I got in trouble, and those opportunities went away. But Hampton was a university that was going to give me an opportunity. But a part of getting the NCAA track scholarship at that time, you had to not only take your SATs, you had to pass your SATs. And that's kind of hard when you're in jail. So there was an opportunity called a furlough, which can be used in different ways in jail, to go on work release, to go to a funeral. But it was used as an incentive for good behavior. You could go home for 24 hours within 2 months of your release. So I applied not for 24 hours, but for 8 hours to go to a test site and come back and, do the rest of my time. Unfortunately, they denied it, which I think speaks a lot about how the criminal justice system works, in particular for people of color, because they had no reason. I was the nerd of the jail. I was doing my schoolwork, wasn't getting in trouble, working in the kitchen, all the things that others that got theirs approved weren't doing. So why did you single me out to not approve it? So when that happened, I went to my cell, read the SAT College Board book, and there was a section in there for students with disabilities. So I actually wrote a letter under that exemption to get the tests administered on site. And it didn't stop. They didn't stop with that. They tried to, the day of my test, to do a shakedown of my unit to try to plant contraband on me, so that I would go back to solitary confinement and not be able to take my test. But a young man named Shank, who most people would consider a throwaway to society based on his name and his background, but he actually took the blame for that and allowed me to go take my SATs and become the first kid ever in America to do that.
So they gave it to you in the prison.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what was that like? I mean, they just pulled you out until the cafeteria and said, "Here's a proctor,"
Well, when you're in New York State, every state is different, but in New York State, you're a minor at 17. In Georgia, where I live now, in Atlanta, you're an adult at 17. So you wouldn't even have known me if the same situation had happened in Georgia, which is a whole nother conversation to have for another time. But in New York State, when you go to jail as a minor, you have to go to school every day if you don't have your GED or a high school diploma. So you go to school, and their goal is to get you to take your GED. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to graduate high school, which is another thing I was able to do. I graduated with my class with a high school diploma, not a GED. So they administered in the class the same way they would administer a GED test in the jail.
And then you got the letter there that said you passed?
I got it later. I can't remember it's 20-something years ago now, but I got it. They sent it to my house, and then that was the last step for me to get eligibility for a scholarship.
I love that. I mean, it's such a story of you just kept persisting. I can make this happen.
Yeah, and I made history. I tell people, when you're trying to, you don't try to make history. You just try to go about making change and doing something that you're passionate about, and history will come along with that. I had no idea. I didn't know anybody had not done that before. I was just trying to get my life back at that point and get to college.
So you end up at Hampton,
Mhm.
and then you decide maybe that's not the best place for me. What was sort of the thought process thing then got you to DC to work with a nonprofit?
Yeah, so when I was there, I met a guy named Bob Woodson, Robert L. Woodson, a civil rights leader, um, amazing body of work. And he was speaking at the university. And at that time, I wasn't doing well at Hampton. I was struggling. It was a big transition from jail to college. It wasn't as focused as I should be. And that's why UMGC was actually a better fit for me. When I got to DC. But I told him my story, long story short, and he was doing work with gangs and helping kids get out of gangs and helping communities who were struggling with violence through different types of mentoring programs and other programs. And he said, "Hey, why don't you come up and work for me in DC?" And at the time, I was like 19 or 20. And I had to, call my parents and tell them, "Hey, I'm leaving Hampton after all this work it took to get there." And they were like, they didn't agree with it really. I can't remember all the details, but yeah, I went to DC and started working for the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise under Bob Woodson's leadership and stayed with him for 7 years. But that got me to DC. And a part of that deal was that I would go to school at night and finish my degree.
So you're working by day with kids who are trying to find a way out of this, and at night you're like taking business classes or whatever it was. And did that sort of it's not a contradiction, but did that dichotomy sort of hit you sometimes?
Yeah, it was. What was interesting about it was I was doing work in DC, I was doing work in Atlanta, I was doing work in LA, I was doing work in Baltimore, Chicago. I was in a lot of cities. So I got a chance to see all the different challenges different cities were facing. And what I realized is that they're all the same challenge. The history may be different. And that was the only difference. But what I learned was that young people, um, if given hope, can push through the most challenging situations. And hope, in many ways, came through individuals that we called human antibodies. So, when you go to the doctors, if you're sick, typically the doctor will first try to help you strengthen your immune system. Then they'll go to medicine, then they'll go to surgery. And Bob's approach was to start with people in the community who had already been doing good work, who were creating change, who were helping people get into college, helping people get off drugs, helping people get out of gangs. Uh, all these different things happen in communities every day. We just don't hear about it on the news. And they're typically people who don't wear a title like mine at Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Typically, there's somebody in the neighborhood who people turn to when they're in need. So whenever I go to a city, I go to a barbershop, I go to a hair salon, I go to a local church, I go and I ask them, where do you go to when you need help? And then I go talk to those people and ask those same questions. But those are human antibodies that exist in communities every day that are overlooked, that are doing change. And that is what was interesting for me going to school at night, but then also being around these human antibodies every day in different cities was pretty special.
Yeah, it sounds like it was very positive, very encouraging.
Yes, because I met other people like me, and I didn't realize that at the time. I didn't realize there were people like me. Yeah.
Was that sort of that moment where you realized, like you said, when you were in prison, you realized you had to figure out what you were going to be, but now the moment is that is what I want to be?
Yeah, this is what I want to be. I want to be a human antibody. I want to be a defender of potential. And I'm comfortable with my story. That was a big part. When you've been in jail, you come out with this stigma, especially as a Black guy with a bald head and a few muscles. So you walk through life, worrying if someone's fearful of you and just all these different things you carry. But Bob had a way of showing us that you still have value in society, even though you made mistakes. And that story is actually your superpower. And that's what I've leaned into my whole career. That has actually been a superpower for me. What I once saw as something that may be negative about me.
So the things that people saw maybe as a negative, you've turned into a positive.
Yeah, I've turned it into a whole story. I've turned it into a book. I've turned it into a career. It's part of who I am, my story.
Are there kids along the way that you've met that you remember really vividly about how you helped turn things around, or their story or something like that that sticks with you?
Yeah, outside of my door, there is a picture of a little and a big. And Stephen is the little, and Mike is his big. And there's a picture of him graduating high school and then going to Harvard University like his big did, his mentor, graduating from Harvard, and then also now becoming a big brother to a young person in the program. So it's like a full circle moment for a little young person who grew up in a tough environment to get a mentor, go to college, go to the same college, go to Harvard, graduate now as a mentor in the program. So there's stories, young people I meet every day who push through something and are now, reaching their full potential.
How does that make you feel?
Makes you feel good. That's what gives me my fuel to do this work. I've been in youth development nonprofit for over 20 years now, and it's not easy work. Every day you're dealing with challenges that families have, and you're dealing with just what's going on in the nonprofit sector now and the government and all the different things that come at us in this space. So that is my fuel. And now, doing this so long, my focus is not necessarily children, it's my staff who support the children, and the mentors, the bigs who support the children. That is really in the role I am in today, with nearly 100 people who work for me. They make it, the matches happen. They make the work happen. They do the mentorship, and they support all the 3,000 kids that we support here in Atlanta Metro this year.
Once again, you're listening to Kwame Johnson on Unstoppable Stories. If you want to hear more stories like Kwame's, don't forget to like or subscribe on your favorite podcast channel. Going back to what you just said, Kwame, did you ever think I'm going to manage like a $9 million budget, 100 employees, help 3,000 kids? Was that ever in your vision?
No, it wasn't. My initial prayer in solitary was a simple prayer, and I won't make this about faith and that type of thing, but my simple prayer was that I hope no one else has to go through the situation. That was it was a simple thing, but I felt it to my bones, because being in solitary, I had grown men crying for their mom every night on this side. I had grown men barking like dogs on this side, and I'm like, am I going to lose my mind? I don't know. How do we determine if you keep your mind or you don't? God bless me to keep my mind. So it was a simple prayer. I don't want anybody else to go through this situation, and that has turned into this whole career. When I was working for Bob, he modeled for me what a CEO looked like. He modeled for me what getting comfortable with your story looked like. So I said, you know what, I want to do that one day. I want to run my own nonprofit one day. And that is when I decided to start making some strategic moves in my career to learn how to fundraise, learn how to run programs so that I could be a CEO one day. But it didn't start that way. It just kind of all came together over time.
What did Bob think of your evolution?
I think bittersweet. I think Bob wanted me to stay with him forever. And when I tell you about what I say about giants, who Bob is a giant, giants cast big shadows. And at some point you want to move from that shadow. So I think it was bittersweet. I think he's proud of me and what I'm doing now, but I think he might have preferred for me to stay with him. But this was my path.
What's the biggest challenge in the sense of running Big Brothers, Big Sisters? Is it finding the mentors? Is it outreach? Is it fundraising? What is it that is your challenge every day?
Yeah, it's fundraising, and it's finding dollars and finding bigs. That's what I always say, right? So fundraising, of course, in particular in this climate where everyone's kind of pulling back and there's a lot of uncertainty across corporate, foundation, individuals, government, but also volunteerism, I think, is changing in America. I think younger generations want to do more one-off engagements. Go clean a park, go paint a building. And those are all great things. But my pitch has always been to people, leaders of any age, if you want to make your city better, you need to focus on helping young people get out of high school. That is the one single thing I continue to preach, in particular kids that are further away from opportunity. We all have opportunity, but there's some people in America that are further from opportunity. And that is my goal, is to help them get out of high school. But now a lot of the volunteers don't want to be a big for a year. That's what we ask. They may want to be a big for a day. So we're looking at how we can accommodate people and engage them where they are. You know, baby boomers, they'll be a big for 10 years, 20 years. I have tons of stories of baby boomers who, where the little was in their wedding, and now they're in their wedding, you know, and I just don't see this. I've had bigs and littles open businesses get together. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but you know, millennials and I think the younger generations, they see volunteerism different. So we as a society, I think, have to meet them where they are and figure out ways to engage them in mentorship in ways that make sense for them.
Yeah, you've got to sort of find the new blueprint, you know, that works.
Exactly.
For you. How did you end up with the CEO job? I'm just curious. What was like the process?
So after being in DC for 10 years, roughly, I said, you know what? And I've worked was with Bob for 7, went to communities and schools and other big nonprofit, doing work, helping kids stay in school and not dropping out. And I said, you know what? Now I'm ready to be a CEO, a leader. And I looked at a few opportunities, and one came up open in Atlanta for an organization called Power My Learning. And there was an executive director role. That title is interchangeable in nonprofit, executive director, typically for smaller nonprofits, and then CEO for, you know, mid-sized and larger nonprofits. So I got that opportunity. It got me to Atlanta to help do work in schools. And then almost 8 years ago now, Big Brothers and Big Sisters reached out to me about an opportunity. And yeah, the rest is history.
I love that. What do your parents think now?
They're proud. You know, they I think they're still not 100% comfortable with me telling my story. I think there's just the protective parent in them, but they see what it has created for me. It's created a whole lane, a whole career for me. So I think they see that it all worked out, and they're super proud of me. They were actually just here for my son's 13th birthday, so it was good to see them.
Does your son like, Dad, don't preach to me?
Yeah, you know how teenagers are, you know. But yeah, he's along for the journey, so he gets to see a lot of the work that I'm doing, and hopefully he'll do that at some, you know, in some shape or form as he becomes an adult.
Now you're also not just dealing with kids. You run like a men's group every couple of weeks. You guys meet?
Yeah, they actually meet here this afternoon. This evening they meet here every third Tuesday, and it's
so
called,
what is that about?
It's a safe space for men to come and talk about things that are on their mind. You know, men face a lot of silent, quiet challenges, and we wanted to create a space for them to work through those things. It's not therapy; we call it therapeutic, and we always have a speaker on a different topic, whether it be finances or health, and mental health, and but really a safe place for men to come and talk. Who may not be in therapy or who can't afford therapy. But then it is also an opportunity for us to recruit men, in particular men of color, which is the hardest group of men for us to recruit for mentors. We have a few hundred kids waiting for mentors here in Atlanta. We have 10,000 waiting across the country. So that is a big pitch to your audience. If you're in any city and you want to give back and make your city better, sign up to be a mentor, whether it's with us or somebody else, but pour into the next generation.
Because I love your message that education is your way out. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think if more mentors saw that, more people saw that, they'd be like, oh, I should do this.
Yes. And there's actually a lot of research on the benefit that mentors get out of mentoring. So we know that mentors have better health outcomes. We know mentors do better on their jobs. We know mentors earn more. So there's this magic that happens when you pour into someone else, you're actually pouring into yourself. And anytime I talk to a big or a mentor in our program, the first thing they say to me is they've gotten more out of this than they put in. That is the common thing they always say, hands down.
So for anyone watching or listening, tell me what a job description of a mentor is. Like, what would the person have to do?
They would just have to be someone that cares about young people, And that's the myth, right? The myth is that a mentor is adoption. The myth is that mentorship is something I'm not good enough for yet. Those are all myths, in particular for men. You are good enough just the way you are. If you are safe for kids and you want to spend 8 hours a month helping a young person, that is the only job description. We take care of the rest. We train you, we support you. You get a coach with our team once you get matched to walk with you through the life of the match. We give you ideas, plans, troubleshoot, all those different things. So we say it takes little to be big. So I always try to combat the myths that I don't have the time, I'm not good enough. Those are things that we all can do, and it's not about creating new time. None of us have time to create new time, but it's about how do you incorporate this young person in your existing time. We all go to the grocery store. We all go to the park. These are outings, that a young person can come along with you and actually learn something through a conversation. So it's you can do big by being little. It does not take some big act. It's not adoption or these type of things. It's something we all can do.
So what would people find themselves doing? Like you said, like go to the park, go to the grocery store. What other common things would a mentor do?
Yeah. So when I signed up to do it, which is a whole nother story, because Shank's real name is Anthony, and I got matched with a young man named Anthony. He was 8 at the time, and my son was 8 at the time. And we would, every other weekend, I would call his mom and go pick him up for a few hours. We go to the park, we go to outings, we go to the games, we go to the jump park, or we just have a conversation over a meal at Chick-fil-A. These were all just simple routine things. A couple calls throughout the week, just checking on him, seeing how he's doing in school. But that is what it was. It was just that. It was not some huge thing. And kids, a lot of they in particular kids who are in low income communities, they really just need to see what's possible. I was talking to some pastors recently, and they were asking about why kids don't go to church and how we get some more kids to go to church. And I was telling them that kids don't want to hear a sermon, they want to see one. They want a living, tangible example of what's possible. And in any way that you can just show up and just tell them what you do and how you did it. In many ways, we as leaders in this country are aliens to a lot of young people in America. And if we would just show up, give them hope, give them an example of what's possible, that's in a lot of ways, that's all it takes.
Are you still in contact with little Anthony?
I haven't talked to him in a few. They moved out of town, but I did hear that he's doing well in school and he's doing good. So, and that's the thing. These relationships can be for a year, a few years. Just leaning in to help a young person can make a huge difference and plant those seeds for later in life.
So did you sort of think there was a trend here with the Anthonys?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, we'll see what's next, right? Anthony, and so. But I think God gives you nudges along the way to let you know you're on the right track. And I think that's what that was for me.
I read that in something that you had reconnected with Anthony or Shank.
Yes.
And tell me how that went, and how that felt.
Yeah, it took a while. Like, it really was people, when I would speak, they would always ask about him, right? So I said, I don't even know his real name. Let me try to figure out where he is. And I asked around, and Facebook, right? That helps you reconnect with everybody, So reached out on Facebook, learned that he was in Richmond, now running a business, a dispensary, legal business, and connected with his daughter and doing well, So it was good, because I kept getting that question. Like, that was always the number one question I would get whenever I would speak on the stage.
I read through like different excerpts and your homecoming speech. I'm like, where's Anthony? And then I finally found that you said you had found him. So I think it's people just natural curiosity. They want to know, how do you end up considering he took sort of a hit for you,
Yeah. And he didn't even really remember it. It was kind of just like there was some magic and a lot of things happening in that moment for that to happen. So
what for you, what do you want the future to be? More mentors, obviously, more help, but what do you see what's your vision?
My big vision is to solve poverty. not to eliminate it, because we will always have some form of poverty, but we should not be in a place in America where more than 50% of kids in public education live in poverty. We got like 55 million kids in public education. Um, so, what I hope to get a Nobel Peace Prize for one day is for solving poverty. And the way I see that happening is through making mentorship a part of the fabric in our country. The term mentoring does not exist in every language. There's no like equivalent for it in Latin, for example. So in different parts of the world, mentoring is seen as just something you do. It's like family. So my hope is, because for me, this is bigger than Big Brothers and Big Sisters. We serve a few 100,000 kids across the country. We're the largest mentoring agency in the country, but there are millions of young people that need mentors in our country right now. So my goal is to make mentorship a part of what leaders do at some shape or form. Like, I wish we could do like a draft where you had to be a mentor at some point, but that would maybe be not the right way to go about it. But just what if that was something we all subscribe to? And what's another great thing about mentoring is that it brings different people together from different walks of life. You and I are from different worlds probably and different walks of life, but through a mentoring relationship, I guarantee you will learn something from me and I will learn something from you. And it's very hard to hate someone that you're in close proximity with. And I think in the divided times that we live in, mentoring can be a solution for that as well, where it brings people together from different worlds, where both sides get better.
Yeah, it builds community.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're feeling detached, it's a way to feel attached.
Yeah.
And I know you're an upstate New Yorker and I'm a downstate New Yorker.
Yeah, so we're definitely different, like that.
We are definitely different people. I loved when you said that. It cracked me up because that's an argument,
Definitely.
It's like you have poured everything into this and you have a great positive attitude. If you hadn't found this, what would you be? You know what I mean? It's hard to say, but it's like you have found your calling.
Yeah, when I got to Hampton, I had originally majored in engineering just because my brother was an engineer. And that was the only reason, And then I went to business because I said, I'll do something in business. And until I met Bob, I didn't know about me. Like, this role wasn't something anyone told me about. No one told me that I could do good and do well at the same time. So the nonprofit sector, to me, I think should be taught more and spread more to, young leaders so they know that this is a $1 billion industry and you can give back and you can do good and do well. So, I think it was all planned out. This was supposed to happen. And what I say to people is that, like, you're right, you don't pick your passion, you discover it. And what I've learned about just different leaders is that typically your passion lies in your tragedy somewhere, that you find who you're going to become in a challenge area, and that your passion comes from that, right? So it's kind of hard to describe, but often people, if they really dig deep and think about who they become, if they have tapped into their passion, it's typically come out of some thing you've overcome in your life or some setback, and that fuels you to want to work on whatever that is and be in that space.
And for you, what was that setback then? It was prison.
It was solitary confinement, not just jail, because jail and solitary are very different things. And it was those conversations with those young men. That's where I found it.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody does. They go through their life and don't find their passion. So I love that you found your passion.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us today, Kwame. We loved having you share your inspiring story. It was really great. And for everybody listening and watching, please remember to like and subscribe if you want to hear more of these great stories from this season, our last season on Unstoppable Stories. You'll find it on your preferred podcast channel. Thanks so much again, Kwame. We really enjoyed having you.
Thank you. I enjoyed telling the story, and go check out the book, The Hope Inside. It's a great read for all ages.